Okay, excellent. Well, I'm pleased today on another episode of the InsurTech Leadership Podcast to be joined by Kevin Ostrander. He is Chief Revenue Officer at One Inc. One Inc. runs the insurance industry's payment network, helping more than 300 carriers modernize how they collect premiums and pay claims through technology built specifically for insurance workflows. Kevin has spent his career selling enterprise technology into insurance, including 6 years at Thunderhead before it was acquired by Accel-KKR. And he's now leading the sales engine behind a platform processing over $245 billion in annual payment volume. Welcome, Kevin.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me, Joshua.
Absolutely. Pleased to have you on. So just to start, any other sort of gaps in the background or steps leading up to One Inc. that you'd like to fill in beyond that intro?
No, I think you pretty much hit it. As you said, I've been in the insurance industry now for almost 16 years, working with property and casualty insurance carriers on finding better ways to engage with their policyholders and their customers. And certainly thrilled to be here and telling our story today, which is great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Pleased to have you on. So, I guess I'd jump in with a question here. Kind of when you walk into a carrier's office and they're still cutting paper checks for claims, is there something in particular you notice about how they think about their business compared to maybe companies that have already started to modernize?
Well, I think it's interesting. The industry is still predominantly based on paper check. And I don't think it's because there's a lack of desire to operationalize and drive a better customer experience. It's inherently due to the complex nature of the P&C insurance industry, and particularly claims payout in the moment of truth or that time of need for a policyholder. When you look at the claims disbursement process, it would be very, very simple if we were just making single party payouts to the policyholders, but that's not the nature of the business, right? You may have a total loss where you have to pay a lien holder. You may have a mortgagee use case with a property line of business where there is a mortgagee on your home that needs to understand if the asset was protected. 50+% of the payouts in the insurance industry actually go out to third-party participating vendors. You've got loss-adjusted expenses related to it. And, frankly, the reason the industry hasn't solved the problem completely yet is those workflows that are inherently complex and lend itself to multi-party claims payouts need to be solved and digitized first. And so oftentimes when we're working with carriers that are still based on paper checks, it's not out of a desire to not digitize, drive operational savings or a better customer experience. The real question is who can solve all those use cases that ultimately are going to allow us to deliver the ROI that a project takes to be justified internally, which is great.
And are the use case challenges kind of, related to technology? Is it internal processes? Is it regulatory concerns or something else?
I think the answer is all of the above, which makes it a complicated industry, right? I think ultimately there are challenges regarding data and data integrity on who the payouts are going to. I think when you have a check payout and ultimately you're just dropping a check in the mail to a mailbox that you have on file, right? That's not necessarily the most complicated use case. But when you start getting into the process where you've got a multi-party payment that needs to be signed off by a third party before it can be released to the policyholder, or alternatively, you've got use cases where all 50 states have unique jurisdictional requirements around Department of Insurance, compliance, mailbox rules and regulations, depending on line of business, things like workers' compensation, et cetera. And then ultimately, ways to drive digital. You've got to have in a lot of different use cases, either bank account information that you've captured and stored on file. You've got to have email addresses. You've got to have SMS information and the ability from a TCPA perspective to send a notification out to your policyholder, right? That is the complexity of the overall industry. And frankly, that's what we've been attacking for the last 10 plus years in driving the highest percentage of payments digital in the industry overall.
And what about the other side of the coin? Once you get into working with a client, are the things they find actually maybe are a bit easier now that you've been working on it for 10 years than they might expect in kind of going down this path to get away from paper checks?
Yeah, I think that those complications that I've talked about, which can vary, if you look at this from a matrix perspective, you look at, not only a carrier and what they have for data integrity or core systems that they have within their environment. And then you look at complexity as it lays out across different lines of business and then different states and different jurisdictional requirements. That mesh or that complexity that sits over the top of every single carrier makes it frankly, an inhospitable, very difficult environment for someone to build technology, come in, understand the intricate nature of the property and casualty insurance industry, and then subsequently build technology that overlays with all of that complexity and allows you to deliver the outcome. And I think when you're a fast-growing software company, you learn a lot, right? And part of that is, you earn the right to be a fast-growing software company by driving and building great technology. And then the second aspect of it is as you go through multiple deployments and dozens or hundreds of deployments, you earn those battle scars and you get better and better as you go through it. And you bring a set of best practices, recommendations, and know-how, which help you guide a client through an actual delivery of a technology platform that wants to deliver the outcome that the carrier is invested in, and ultimately deliver an ROI on the back end of that technology project against, a complicated and a complex ecosystem internally where you're competing for dollars and resources every given time to prioritize a project that's going to impact your customer experience or impact your internal operations. So those best practices and those lessons learned through, some challenging really carrier deployments that we've learned together, in partnerships that we've built not only within carriers, but also within the entire insurance-related ecosystem, is some of the value that we're able to deliver to carriers on best practices that ultimately allow us to deliver a successful ROI.
And is ROI still the main thing that carriers are looking at when they make a decision?
Well, I think every carrier is looking at it a little bit different, right? But at the end of the day, turning an ROI in a successful financial model is, it's a business, right? But what's been fun about being at One Inc. over these last 6 years. I've been here for 10 plus years, but the last 6 years as the market has changed dramatically, right? You went through the pandemic. Post-pandemic, you went through rising customer experience expectations because customers got used to things being digital and rapid change that had gone through. We went through an inflationary environment where cost went through the roof, and that created significant challenges on combined ratio, et cetera. Is the digital payments ROI, and that's both across inbound and outbound, is incredibly malleable. And I can use ROI in many terms, right? You start talking about the COVID use case where folks had to drive digital and get folks out of the office, right? This was a great use case to drive digital payments and get folks out of writing paper checks. You talk about the secondary use case where you talk about customer experience, in the time of need, issuing a digital claim payout in minutes rather than waiting for days, right? A great customer experience. And you start talking about the vast majority of your customers aren't going through a claims process at any given time within their life cycle. So when they go through that is when you're going to drive a massive amount of retention and giving them payment optionality and the ability to drive choice and the funds being in their preferred account in seconds versus waiting for days when a check and a claim's been adjudicated. And then the third use case is cost, right? Checks inherently are incredibly expensive. There's B of A studies and other third-party studies that can show the cost of a check fully loaded, including service, print, mail, et cetera, anywhere from $6 to $25 a check. And if you can drive those digital and eliminate a lot of those manual tasks and the hard cost related to it, there is a financial ROI related to it. And so that malleable message really allows us to align with the carrier and what their goals and objectives are for any given year and build a story that aligns our software and technology with what their strategic objectives are to deliver a positive outcome.
And what typically stays and kind of what typically goes when you do an implementation in terms of the way the carrier has been doing things previously?
Geez, a little bit of a loaded question, right? I think there's different aspects of it. I think first and foremost, most carriers are very, very worried not only about the policyholder experience, but secondarily about the adjuster experience. And you start talking about your internal operations, and carriers have invested so much over over the entire lifetime on having an easy to use adjuster experience that eliminates manual tasks. Right. And if there's more manual tasks related to issuing a digital payment, such as capturing someone's email address or capturing somebody's SMS sign off and TCPA certification before the payment is digitized, you're going to have a problem with adjuster usage. Right. And if you have a problem with adjuster usage and it's easier for them to simply issue a check internally, the outcome of the process will not be what you're driving towards with a digital payment application. So a lot of what stays and goes is, how do you marry best practices technology and best practices implementations, not only from an API and an integration perspective, but also with change management. And a lot of what we focus on is we've built an entire team in an organization that, post pre-go live, we're actually engaging with change management professionals on the carrier side. We're creating FAQs, we're creating videos that work with the adjusters, and we're really training those adjusters so that it becomes a seamless part of their day-to-day process that is additive and not adding tasks that are manual in nature. And ultimately that allows them to drive the outcome that they expect.
And you referenced inbound and outbound previously. So I think you have premium pay and claims pay for those two sides of things. It seems like historically a lot of carriers have treated those as separate problems, but it seems like you guys are sort of saying you really ought to approach this from the same platform. Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talk a lot about claims because we talk about, digitizing outbound disbursements, getting away from paper checks. And if you look at it holistically and you have a true strategic objective as a carrier, you want your policyholders to have a single consistent experience anytime that they engage with you as an insurance carrier, right? In the e-commerce world, it's referred to as an omni-channel experience, right? You go onto a website and you want to make a purchase on the website. If you pick up the phone, that experience should follow you across. Why are insurance carriers any different, right? Joshua, if you're online and you're making a payment for your insurance premium and you're going to use a debit card, why when we go to do a premium refund or we go to do a claims payout, are they asking you to re-enter that debit card information? That wallet from a policyholder not only should follow on an omni-channel experience on the inbound side, which is if you're paying online or you're paying at new business bind in an agent's office, or alternatively, you're calling in via an IVR or CSR use case, all the way through the disbursements on the back end of the process. And that's what we're creating, right? Is that end-to-end policyholder experience for pay in and pay out. And it's driving significant operational advantages for the carrier in terms of reporting and reconciliation. Payments at its core is a financial function. It's solving things such as vendor sprawl, right? Because you're able to centralize on a single enterprise vendor that can manage all of your different use cases, one partner, one product roadmap, one support organization. And ultimately, that's driving great outcomes for the carriers that we're partnering with. And over 40% of our carriers, we have over 320 carriers, over 40% of our carriers today have attached both products together and are using us as the single enterprise application across the organization, which is a tremendous attach rate around the value of unifying the ecosystem from a payments perspective.
And are there other elements sort of beyond that? Because you guys talk about being a payments network, not a payments processor. I mean, is that the essence of what you're speaking to there, or is it broader than that?
No, it's certainly much more than certainly at our core, we're processing payments. Let's not, push away from that concept. But the general concept, just on the disbursement side, we are building an interconnected network, and we have built, and we continue to build an interconnected network of third-party participants that are paying in and paying out. And we're connecting those abilities for folks to do a one-to-one integration directly through One Inc., as opposed to doing bespoke integrations one-off for each additional carrier. And I'll give you a fantastic use case on the inbound side. It's one thing to say, hey, One Inc.'s user experience, the ability to do things like Venmo and PayPal and Apple Pay and Google Pay from a payment processing perspective is optimizing a particular carrier, and it's just enough of a use case for them to replace their current payment processor with One Inc. On the inbound side, a large portion, sometimes 70 to 80% of the inbound premium collection for property insurance carriers comes from escrowed homeowner payments, which are coming from third-party participating organizations like a Bank of America, a JP Morgan Chase, a credit union, the individuals who you're paying your folks from an escrow perspective for your homeowner's premium. Those folks are traditionally dropping thousands of checks in the mail and dropping them in the mail to different carriers, and they're being processed manually via lockbox. They're taking somewhere between 12 and 15 days. We have created a network that covers 80+% of the escrow premium homeowners on the front end, and we're connecting that directly into 300+ carriers to allow those payments to essentially come in via the equivalent of what is an online payment, where we're actually reaching in, we're validating the payment amount, we're validating the payment information, we're reducing calls that come in, we're reducing the manual processes, and we're actually increasing the speed of premium by sometimes 11 to 12 days, where premium is expected and capital is in the hands of the policyholder, the insurance carriers. Yeah. Driving those payments digital is incredibly complicated. That's the concept of a network, Joshua, right? And being able to do that above and beyond the standard payment processing and the optimized customer experience is where we've gone to not only take the industry to a better customer experience, but actually offer the ability to increase digitization, which is the core of what we're doing and why we're driving incredible success.
Just shifting gears a little bit, I'm just curious, like as CRO, do you own customer success as well? And I believe the company signed, over 100 agreements last year. It sounds like you're on similar, if not a faster pace this year. And I'm just curious, from your perspective at the top of the revenue engine, kind of how do you ensure not just that you get these agreements in place, but then everyone's happy too?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. So I own everything through new business acquisition through customer success. We've got a team of 15 plus individuals that are dedicated to clients and work with clients on a day-to-day perspective, first and foremost, to make sure that the technology we've deployed and the promises we've made are being delivered, but also to make sure that they have a really good understanding of where we're going from an ecosystem perspective, the new technology that we're rolling out and increasing usage. For us, it's not enough to be a fast-growing, technology company. We want to continue to add to our customer base. We want to deliver iterative value, and I think that's incredibly, as a CRO, we make promises to carriers, and we want to follow through on those promises. If you do and follow through on those promises, you're able to build great relationships and continue to expand and deliver mutual value. And that's a core tenet of what we live by at One Inc. and where we've driven a lot of our success.
And again, from your perspective as CRO, bouncing back and forth a little bit on you, but does the network sort of make your job easier as it continues to grow? And I know you also, have Guidewire as a strategic partner, and just curious about sort of your strategy in terms of direct or through channels and strategic partners, et cetera, as you continue to keep your growth rate up.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I was at a recent event and I talked a little bit about this. I joined One Inc. 10 years ago when we had single-digit customers. The founders had done a fantastic job of helping to build the organization. But at that point, it was hard to walk the halls of third-party participants, the ecosystem, the network folks, those escrow premium organizations that are massive organizations or on the back end of the claims payout, or to say, hey, sign up and we may have some folks that make claims payouts to you. And that paradigm has changed. We often talk about the network flywheel, right? As more and more carriers join the ecosystem, it gives One Inc. more and more power to go out and build connections to third-party network participants, both on the inbound side and the outbound side, that deliver iterative value for everyone who participates, right? So in that escrow premium pay use case, those organizations are incredibly interested in working with us because we're able to digitize, 40 to 50% of their claims payout, their premium payouts that traditionally go by paper mail instantly, right? By plugging into the carriers that we're working with. On the same side, the carriers are interested in us because, hey, we have that connection to those groups that can drive a 60 to 70% increase in digitization that no one else can do. So to answer your question, Joshua, yes, absolutely, it makes our job easier. And frankly, I joke with my sales reps that it makes their job easier every day because we have things that other folks don't, and that drive a tremendous amount of iterative value. Our sales team's job is to make sure that the carriers can understand and shift through that FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that competitors are raising because, frankly, we're having a tremendous amount of success. And if you're able to build a relationship with the carrier and allow them to understand the iterative value that you can deliver, you've got the great steps for an initial level of a partnership that can grow and expand over time.
What about expansion into new markets, other lines of business, life insurance? How does your, again, from the CRO seat or the feedback coming back from your sales team into your product folks, how does that all work to decide where to go exactly?
Yeah, I'd say from an executive team perspective, we've been very cautious about expanding historically, and the reason has been we've had so much great initial success in the property and casualty insurance industry that we wanted to make sure that we were delivering on those promises that we made, right? And it's very, very easy to get distracted very, very quickly, and to start to grow your focus above and beyond and chase additional revenue in ancillary markets, et cetera. That has, over the last 24 plus months, we've grown organically within the life insurance space. The life insurance space is a fast follow to the property and casualty space in terms of digitization and modernization. And we have had a tremendous amount of success there with large, tier one enterprise carriers. You'll see a press release out there for AAA Michigan, which is a large enterprise group, AAA Life. Also Transamerica and other groups are working with us. Perfectly adjacent industry. The product works perfect. It solves a heavily manual paper-based inbound premium collection process that is frankly rife with a lot of manual intervention. It's hard to believe in sometimes the carrier stories that we talk through. Above and beyond the life insurance space, for a long period of time, carriers have been pulling us into adjacent markets from a geographic perspective. We've launched our solution in the Canadian market for claims disbursements in partnership with our partner at Guidewire, which owns 80+% of the industry over there from a claims administration perspective. And so we're starting to make really, really targeted bets where we know we're going to be able to deliver significant value while maintaining our eye and focus on delivering on the promises that we've made for our current customers.
What is your role like today compared to, when you started with the organization and had single digit customers, and, what were the things you needed to get in place and playbooks and cadences, et cetera, you need to get in place then versus the things you're focused on now?
Yeah, I think really early on, it's a great question, and this is my first time in a head of sales role, right? And I've seen the growth of a company from single digits of customers to 300 plus, and working with some of the largest insurance carriers. We're all across the top 10, top 20 insurance carriers today. A lot of what it is in the early stages, you're hands-on, day-to-day sales team, sales reps, delivery, working through, end-to-end, making sure every client is successful, right? You need to build your brand. You've got to have brand awareness. You've got to get up and running, and you've got to drive some success, which you can build on. As we've grown the organization, the importance of hiring really good people to run very specific operational roles has become even more and more important, right? There's not enough time in the day to manage and service all of these customers at scale that we have. And we've been lucky to hire tremendous individuals across the organization, and particularly on my team, that have taken parts of the org and done things with it that I could never do myself, right? They're specialists, they're experts, they're professionals. And we've got these folks that are really building at scale the ability to continue to our rapid growth rate, which is 40+%. If you see some of our data points out there at scale, which is tremendous. And the people that have put processes and technology, et cetera, in place to allow us to continue to scale without necessarily adding just more and more heads to a operational challenge have been instrumental to our overall growth.
So some sales leaders really love sort of the 0 to 1 phase, and, we'll help companies get that in place and then hand it off to the next person and kind of go back to find another opportunity to do that. Other folks would like to be able to stay on from the startup to the scale up, but don't always get the opportunity to do that. If you were to give advice to someone who does want to kind of go from, 0 to 1 to 1 to 10 to 10 to 100 and kind of ride that wave as far as possible, what might you tell them?
I think the number one thing is it's hard. First off, it's incredibly hard. We'll start with that, right? I think the second is the one thing you can't skip in your career is experience. And you've got to get it the ways that you can find it. And you've got to not only get experience, but you have to also find mentors that will help you through that process. Because, I think we live in a time where Everyone wants to have a bigger job title. Everyone wants to have more money. Everyone wants to have more equity. Everyone wants to be the CRO of a unicorn-based organization. And I've been lucky enough to be here for 10 plus years, where I've had incredible mentors. I've had incredible partners, folks like Chris Ewing and Ian, who is our CEO now, that have helped me grow and build the organization as a partner. And as I mentioned earlier, I hadn't had the experience to do this before, right? And so I would say the thing is you can't skip steps and accelerate yourself. You've got to get experience, and you've got to find a great infrastructure with great mentors that will help you. And if you get a chance to do that, where you have really good product market fit, make sure you take advantage of it, because there's lots of different technologies out there. But when you find product market fit and a great technology, you can build a tremendous go-to-market engine that can achieve tremendous success for your investors, your customers, and your employees alike.
So last question for me, and Kevin, I really appreciate having you on, is so if that combination that you just described, continues on, and you look, say, 3 years out from now, what does the insurance payments landscape look like if One Inc continues to execute on its vision?
Yeah, I think 3 years out, first and foremost is
there's another. Sorry to jump in on it, but if there's another horizon you think about, speak to that. However you think of it.
Well, I think 3+ years out, I think if you look at it, if we do our job very well, we are not eliminating checks on the inbound premium side or the disbursement side, but we're in the 90+% digital inbound and digital outbound use case, where we've driven a tremendous amount of operational savings and better customer experience for policyholders and carriers. And we've done that because carriers have trusted us, and we've delivered to become the property and casualty insurance payout network of choice. And that trust that the carriers are providing us gives us an incredible amount of ability to go deliver incredible technology that can solve the most complicated use cases, that will deliver value for all of the stakeholders within the ecosystem. And, we have a tremendous head start on that, but we're just getting started. $245 billion of premium. It's hard to believe. I remember the first day that we processed $1 million in the celebration that we had with, Chris Ewing and Tim Tyanikoff. And, our growth gives us a tremendous spot to help drive rapid modernization in the insurance ecosystem. And we need to deliver on that. And that's what we intend to do.
Great. Well, Kevin, again, appreciate having you on. Anything else you'd like to touch on before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate you having me, and it's been a great conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, great. So Kevin Ostrander, Chief Revenue Officer of One Inc. Thanks again for joining me on the InsurTech Leadership Podcast.